everyone, and welcome to Monetary Mentors Monetary Monastery podcast. Still workshopping that, we'll figure it out. Um, I'm Sam, with me to here is my brother JP. Say hello to everyone, JP.
Hello, everyone. I'm JP. I'm excited to be here to talk to you about some of these fun new Magic cards we're all going to be experiencing in a week or two.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking exclusively at Lost Caverns of Ixalan cards today. Set's coming out, I think, in like a week and a half at the time we're recording. Hopefully we can get this up soon. So you can hear our wild speculation before we have data proving us wrong on things. Then we get it out, our called shots out before the data makes us look like geniuses. So either way we win. I'm very excited to talk about this set. What we're going to do, we're still figuring out the format for these, because what we've done in the last few episodes is we'll do like a preview episode, and then a couple weeks after the set comes out, we'll do like a retrospective and what has actually turned out and talk about it in those terms. So this is our second preview set. Format-wise, we're trying to add a bit more structure to this, I think, than just ramble about cards for 2 hours, which, hey, maybe that's what the people are looking for, but
You will be a lot of rambling about cards. That's what there will be.
No, that's what they're here for. The rambling is what they're here for. It's the 2 hours that maybe. So what we're going to try and do is, instead of talking about all the cards that, I don't know, we kind of consider like slam dunks, and obviously you can miss a slam dunk if you've watched me play basketball. It's possible. But these cards are like the ones everyone seems to be talking about. So we might mention them, but we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about like the obvious big hitters from this set. We're going to be focusing on what we're thinking about as like spicy cards for brewing fun decks, budget pickups, or just cards we think are legitimately good that maybe people aren't talking about enough. So sleepers, spicy stuff, and if I come up with another word that starts with S, we'll make like a framing for it that has good
Super fun.
branding and whatnot. Yeah,
Yeah, super fun.
exactly.
In one word, hyphenated.
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to focus on the slightly off the beaten path cards, because you can listen to much smarter people than us talk about the other ones that are maybe guaranteed to slot into competitive decks or EDH decks at your local game store. So we're just going to dive into this list. The first card we have here is Market Gnome. JP, I think this is one of the few cards we both put on our list of cards we wanted to talk about. Do you want to kick us off by telling us what this card does and why we're excited about it?
Sure, it would be my honor. It's a 1-mana 0/3 and white. A lot of really nice white play creatures that are low to the ground strategies out there. And when it dies, you gain 1 life and draw a card, which is just value. I mean, you can throw this in a blocker for mono red. If they kill it, you're happy. If they don't kill it, you're very happy. And it also has a second ability. When it is exiled from the battlefield while you're activating a craft ability, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So the same, benefit as if it dies. We haven't. So let's just go over crafting while we have a brief moment here. It's a new mechanic to this set, which basically allows you to, and this is a very complicated set, by the way.
Yeah, might as well
Just
get
in
that out
terms
of the
of
way.
reading. Yeah, so Eldraine, we did our preview for, and I was just right off the bat excited about every card. This felt like I had to do a lot of homework for this. Not that I'm not excited about it, but there's just a lot of mechanics that have a lot of steps and a lot of text before you really understand what the card's going to do. So if I could summarize crafting, you have this card. We have Tithing Blade here as a list, as an example. So you pay the craft cost, and then you exile the artifact and a creature, depending on the card, it'll say what it needs to be crafted with. And then you flip the card, and then it'll have a secondary card on the back. Everyone's favorite, just a totally different card, somewhat related to the first card in terms of theme or archetype, but you'll just kind of activate another ability. So you want to have these really cheap creatures that you can throw towards the cost of crafting. And the fact that Market Gnome is cheap, it's useful, it blocks, and when you craft with it, you get an upside, is just really, really useful. So I can see this in Aristocrats decks. I can see this as like slot in against mono red to block for days. And I can see this, if the craft thing becomes a real thing, it's going to probably be because of Market Gnome's value.
Yeah, I like Market Gnome a lot. We can't ignore that it has the artifact type as well, which matters in a lot of synergy-based decks. This kind of reminds me of Unlucky Witness in that it's not like a show-stopping card, but it's just a useful tool, a one drop that just kicks off all your sacrifice strategies. So I like this too. And I'll just circle back to like the set as a whole. It is like needlessly wildly complex. Like this might be one of my least favorite sets in a long time, just because like it's just complicated. Like you read a card, and by least favorite I mean I'm not just not thrilled by it, and the mechanics. Like crafting is just hard to grok, and it makes it very hard. And this is me hedging, why we're going to be wrong about which cards are good. It makes it very hard to like understand what cards are going to be good because we've never seen this before. It's hard to get a sense of how it plays. It feels to me like a very like 4 limited mechanic. Like late in the game, you talked about Tithing Blade. You have a creature lying in your graveyard. You have like an artifact lying around. You pay 5 mana to craft it to get some small upside. That's what most of them have felt like to me. It hasn't seemed like it's built for constructed, which is good because I don't want to see this all the time, but that doesn't mean that like one crafting card couldn't be wildly above rate and just like be good enough to do, and then you see it all the time because it is a strong ability and concept. Most of them just seem very costed for not competitive play though.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna see what happens here. It is it is better than having no text on it, for
Exactly.
sure. But it's also like some of the effects we'll see are like way over the top powerful and kind of fairyland, and some of them are like, I spent 5 mana to do what? Like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess. So
Yeah.
we'll get into it. There's some more complicated, very wordy, lots of processes involved, mechanics in this set. So we'll hit on them with the later cards.
Boy, will we. All right, the next card we have is the Malia Benavides Aguirre. Um, I can start talking about this card. So it's a 2/2 legendary vampire scout creature for a white and a black mana, so 2 mana total. It has ward to pay 3 life, and then it has the text, whenever you gain life, it explores, and then destroy all other creatures if its power is exactly 20. Very interesting. This card very clearly combos with the card Wild Growth Walker, because whenever you gain life, this card explores, and the Wild Growth Walker, whenever you explore, you gain life. So the two of them ping back and forth until Amalia has 20 power, destroys all other creatures, and then you can attack your opponent for 20 damage, which usually wins the game of Magic the Gathering. So there's a lot of excitement about that in formats like Pioneer. Are there any other interesting things you have in mind for this card when you look at it, or is it kind of just like we'll see if that combo deck is good enough to do anything?
Yeah, that deck is pretty interesting. And so that won't be legal in standard, and it won't be legal in alchemy. But we had a little video that we did about some deck techs. I like this in life gain decks. It's Orzhov life gain, and explore is its own reward. Like the creatures, if its power is 20, you don't have to go infinite. If we just get a couple lands in our hand, get a couple +1/+1 counters every time that a creature enters the battlefield with Luminarch Aspirant, or a lot of the Soul Sister effects where you just get creatures coming in. Every time a creature comes in, you gain a life, and therefore you tick up this, explore, get lands in your hand, make sure you're not drawing lands late game, and gives you card advantage kind of in its own way. So in that deck, the Orzhov Life Gain scam deck that we talked about, I was kind of looking for a 2-drop slot to fill in, and this and another card that we talk about later are going to be the first cards that I try in there to see if it fits. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, in the industry they call this a tease. I think I'm going to like that second option better. Because I don't think this card is doing too much in a fair sense. It is a little bit of value. I will say generally I agree with your take on Explore. I think people sleep on Explore as like a value mechanic.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's nothing, but it's maybe a +1/+1 counter, it's maybe draw a land card, it's maybe put something useful in the graveyard, it's maybe make sure you have a good draw for the next turn. I
Yeah.
think I think it can be slept on in a fair way, but I just don't know if this card, because it doesn't gain life itself to trigger its own Explorer, I think it might be a little limited in a fair way. But we can move on to Bartolome del Presidio. And I just apologize, these names are wild. So Presidio is not the hardest one, but I feel like knowing a little Spanish makes this set harder to pronounce because it's like close to Spanish, but it doesn't. It just takes weird
Yeah,
turns halfway through words. It's like, oh, that's not what I was expecting. But anyway, you want to talk about this card a little bit, JP?
sure. This is the other is conveniently lined up
Yeah.
to be the other Orzhov 2 drop that we are talking about. And I like this one because it's a sack outlet, which is just way more valuable than you realize at face value. Just being able to sack something that's being targeted as a removal, being sack something that's gonna block and sack, sack something you want to die. It's just very useful to have. And particularly in the scam deck, you deal with a lot of like exile removal that you really like super annoying. Lots of leyline bindings, lots of Elspeth smites, whatever they want to do. So if you have something like shoot, what is it? I'm blanking. The one black mana when it dies, return to the battlefield. You can trigger your own scam for free at instant speed. So you don't need to rely on other people killing your creatures, and you don't need to fear the inevitable exile effects to get your effect off on your card. So this is the other card that I'm going to be trying in there.
Yeah, I think this card will shine there. And the deck we're talking about, we covered last episode, but it's essentially like prototype creatures,
Yeah,
ways to kill them, ways to gain life, and way to bring them back as their fully evolved prototypes selves, which was a really sweet deck. I like that one a lot when we talked about it. I think this card will shine in that deck. I think this card will shine wherever it's wanted. I'm thinking about Rally the Ancestor decks. I'm thinking about Aristocrats decks. Like this card, anytime they put sacrifice another whatever colon with no mana or tap ability connected to it, that card's
yeah,
good. Like I think the last time we had that was Woe Strider back in like there was Beyond Death, and that was a 3 mana
yeah.
card that just scryed when you sacrifice something. It couldn't sacrifice artifacts. We're living in a very artifact heavy world right now with like Brothers War cards floating around. Um, like this is just going to be good. I think this is going to be excellent.
Yes,
So
yes,
I'm just excited about this card in general. I think it's just wildly efficient. I think it'll do a lot. If you're at all interested in something this card is doing, it's going to do it fabulously for you.
for sure.
The next card, kind of from the same cycle of like 2 color legendary creatures. This card's on the list for one very specific reason. In our Wilds of Eldraine um, preview, I was really excited about Sir Ginger because it was a way for Saheeli Rai and Luxior to combo and win the game through like infinite artifact death triggers / ETB triggers. Um, and it was one of the few effects that worked that way while also being a reasonable card. So this card here, Captain Storm Cosmium Raider. It's 2 mana, blue and a red, for a legendary creature, human pirate, 2/2. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target pirate you control. So I couldn't get Sir Ginger to work. Now I have another 2 drop that probably won't work in the deck, but I just wanted to point out that I have more options now. We have more options now. Um, the other card like this in the set is called Tarian Soul Cleaver, which is a 1 mana artifact that whenever an artifact or creature, the equipped creature, because it's an equipment, is put into a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on equipped creature, and it has vigilance. So same kind of thing. This is just an effect we haven't seen a lot of, which I know from trying to build the Saheeli Rai deck. And I'm not saying that these like make that deck, but I just wanted to highlight these as 2 cards that are infinite. If you have infinite ETBs or death triggers, they're just infinite outlets for that as a way to turn that into a win the game if you're trying to build some janky combo deck that ends up creating those loops. So just wanted to flag those, and we can move on because I don't think they'll be good, but there are technically more tools available to us. So that takes us to our third straight 2 color legendary uncommon creature to talk about. JP, you want to talk about Nikanzo?
Yeah, Nick Cancel, the current conductor. This card looks like they're going back to the old Simic ramp. Also gives you value style. It's a 2 mana in it's a blue green 2/3 legendary creature Merfolk Scout. Has 2 abilities. Whenever a creature you control explores a land card, you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Whenever a creature you control explores a non-land card, put a +1/+1 counter on the Kanzil Current Conductor. And I'm just blown away that this costs 2 mana, because both of these effects seem like very relevant. And I think that if Explore in Simic is a thing, it's going to be entirely off of the back of this value. A lot of exploring you do, you just end up swamped with lands in your hand, or islanded and forested with lands in your hand. And a lot of times, getting those onto the battlefield is a, once per turn thing, but it's not. This effect isn't even a once per turn thing. If you explore and find like 4 lands with some of the later cards in the set that can explore X times, you just ramped 4 times, and now you're casting your 7 drops on turn 4 or whatever you need to do. And also when you're trying to build up another creature, you're also building up Nikanzil just incidentally. There's also a 2/3 for 2, which you can't complain about. It's going to be totally fine against aggro matchups. A lot of 2/2s coming out from mono red that it's going to eat up. So I think this is an incredibly value card, and I'm not sure about the archetype, but I do know that if the archetype exists, this is going to be a great card in it.
Well, yeah, let me jump right off that, because where the archetype is going to exist is in limited, draft, and sealed. I think this is going to be an all-star in those formats, and I don't think it's going to see much play anywhere else. Because, like you, I was blown away when I read this card. I was like, wow, that seems like a ton of value, but this pays you off for exploring, which will happen a lot in this limited format. But in constructed, there aren't that many just like the explore deck doesn't really exist. This card itself doesn't explore, so like by itself it's a 2 mana 2/3. The cards that do explore, you'd be playing with it, or just kind of like meh, right? None of them are seeing play right now. Like there are no Merfolk Branchwalkers running around in like fair Pioneer decks just because the Explorer is so good. So if you fill your deck with those Explorer creatures to pay this off, that just seems like a pretty anemic deck to me. But I do think it'll be great in limited, and I could be wrong. The card does a lot. I just don't know if what it does is worth putting a bunch of Explore cards in your deck.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a wait and see on it just for the archetype, but it's an uncommon, so it doesn't hurt to test it out. Um, we'll see what happens. It's a fun little card. Let's just see where it ends up.
Yeah, another fun little card. We have Abuelo Ancestral Echo. You want to walk us through this one?
Yeah, I really wanted to talk about this one because I've really been enjoying a Azorius Blink package or a Flash package, and it runs a lot of creatures that are prototypes that you can blink. It runs all your Spirited Companions that you can blink, and it already is pretty good. And just having a 3 mana, like sitting there with Ward 2, a way to exile your Spirited Companion when it blocks to negate an attack and draw a card. It doesn't have a great body for blocking itself, but it does have Ward 2, which will pop up a lot. If someone wants to spend their entire turn to remove this once you hit turn 5, 6, then okay, power to them. You might even have a blink effect of your own to save it. But I just think this is like a small little value engine that if they don't remove can just push you completely over the edge in a deck that I think is fun to play, and maybe is just needing one little piece like this to make it competitive.
Yeah, and you're talking about a standard deck there, like a standard
Yeah,
Brody.
yeah. There is a standard Azorius Blink deck that runs it runs the Steel Seraph. It runs all the ETB effects that are nice little value creatures. And I've been playing it, and it's fun to play. I don't think it's the best deck. It might not even be the second or third best deck. But when it gets a piece that's like obviously slated for it, like this, then I can't wait to test it out. I hope I open a few in my packs and can slide him in there and see how he does.
Yeah, I like this card a lot for like Commander. Like, there's so much blink in Commander, and this is an excellent way to do it. Totally reasonable. Like, I'm thinking Eldrazi Displacer 2.0. This creature is also a spirit, which is a relevant creature type in a lot of ways. It has Ward 2, which is, I think, the only reason this card is potentially playable, because it dies to shock, right? So if they're paying 3
Yeah,
mana for
no,
their shock, that's okay, because you're trading equal on mana. but it is a small body. You're paying 3 mana for, and then the value it gives you takes another 3 mana a turn. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm a skeptical of this card in constructed formats, but I think it's really sweet in
So
Commander,
I
and
yeah
we'll see. Like it
yeah
does powerful things, so it could get there.
yeah. It also, because it returns to the battlefield, the next end step, you can have something dodge a Sunfall. So it's not bad in control. It's going to be good in mid range, and I think it's going to be terrible in aggressive matchups. So
Yeah.
we'll see how it goes.
So this ability to pay 3 mana to exile another creature or artifact to control and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. That's powerful, but something I've been coming around on is like we used to be told that creatures had to have ETB abilities, enter the battlefield's abilities to be like playable. And as we've seen cards like Shieldred come along, I think that notion's kind of gone out the window. Like cards that get you incremental value if they stick around can be really strong if they don't require a mana investment every turn. Is where it's like that's my new heuristic for thinking about these cards, which is why I think going to our cards we're not going to talk about because like they're just clearly slated to be powerhouses. Bonehorde Dracosaur is like the most messed up card I've maybe ever seen in my life. Because like yes, it dies to Doomblade, and like thank God it dies to Doomblade without doing
Yeah.
anything. Because like if this sticks for one turn, you're winning that game, right? Like, and that's kind of what 5 mana creatures have to do these days, I guess. But like, boy, is this card incredible.
Yeah.
And like, who
Did
knows?
they have to give it first strike?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. So anyway, the difference with Abuelo is that 3 mana investment to make the thing happen just seems tough for me to make work. Whereas the next card I want to talk about, Akal Pakal First Among Equals, which I don't know if it's actually pronounced Akal Pakal, but that's the coolest name ever.
packle packle.
So this is a 3 mana legendary creature human advisor. It's a 1/5, so it's going to sit there and block for days. And it has the text at the beginning of each player's end step. Each player, mind you, if an artifact entered the battlefield under your control this turn, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. So I just have my eye on this card. I don't necessarily have the spot it goes in mind, but I'm thinking about decks that run like Third Path Iconoclast or Sahili Sublime Artificer or Psy Master Thopterist. All the food decks that we have running around, all the, think about map tokens and Oni Cult Anvil and blood tokens. And like if you have a deck that can put artifacts into play with any regularity, this is wild. This is a wild ability. Like I'm thinking about Mox Amber decks and Pioneer, thinking about Emery. There's just a lot going on here because this ability, if this card sticks around, doesn't take a mana investment every turn. It takes a deck investment. Your deck has to be making this happen, but there are like a gajillion ways to be making this happen consistently on your turn, on your opponent's turn. You are drawing the best card out of the top 2 cards of your deck, and the other card is going to your graveyard, which is a form of value in and of itself. Like maybe that's where you want the card in the first place. Maybe that's why you're playing this. So I haven't seen anyone talking about this card, and I could totally see it never sniffing play because it's a 3 mana 1/5 that you have to build around and it doesn't do a lot. But I don't know. I just see a ton of upside here.
Yeah, I agree with you that it just is value. If you have ways to make map tokens, which we'll talk about a little bit later, as like a value, like they're not really aggressively costed. Like they're not hard to get onto the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
My only thing is like thinking about standard decks. I don't. There for whatever reason, all the artifacts ETB effects because of Eldraine are now in green, and then also in red and black. Not a lot of blue artifacts going around, but we have a lot of artifacts in this set and in previous sets, so maybe. I mean, it draws you a card with selection every turn, and it's gonna be a decent body to sit back and grind value with. So, we'll
Yeah,
see.
it works with artifact lands. It works with tokens. It's not limited in
Mm,
either of those
yeah.
regards. Um, I'm just thinking about like treasure tokens, like Pioneer, turn 4, play this and attack with your Goblin Shaman from Fable the Mirror Breaker, and look at the top 2 cards, put one in your hand, one in the graveyard. Seems kind of good. Seems kind of good.
Yeah.
We can move on to another legendary 3-drop. I think seems kind of good. Speaking of treasure tokens, we have Breach's Eager Pillager. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red. For a legendary creature, Goblin Pirate, it's a 3/3 with first strike. And whenever a pirate you control attacks, it is a pirate, so it triggers itself. Choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Number 1, create a treasure token. Number 2, target creature can't block this turn. Number 3, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. So it pays you out for attacking with the first 3 pirates that you attack with each turn. If there's a pirate deck anywhere in Standard, Alchemy, Historic, Pioneer, if there's a pirate deck, this is the reason why.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just it reminds me a lot of the scoundrel we got from last set, which gives you 3 options that are all very good. The problem is I don't think there are any pirates that you're throwing down and swinging out with in a dedicated pirate deck, and in like a mono red aggro shell, there are so many really good 3 drops. You have Squee, you have Godric from the last set, so that's going to be competing with a spot for them. So it'll be interesting to see if a slightly slower, more value-oriented red deck, emerges with this as one of its focal cards.
Yeah, the sequence I'm picturing, okay? You're
Yeah,
playing a
yeah.
red black base, maybe splash blue, but red black base pirate deck in Pioneer per se. You
Hmm.
turn 1, you thought seize them, totally fine. Turn 2, kite sail freebooter, take a card out of their
Okay.
hand. Turn 3, play this, attack with the freebooter in the air for a damage, make a treasure token, have a mana up for fatal push. And then next turn, you're just set up in a million ways. Granted, maybe the pirates aren't good enough. That could totally be true. But if there's a pirate deck, this is the reason why.
No, it definitely has a really big payoff. So we'll see. I mean, this is a fun card. If I open some, I'm gonna play it. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, let's move on to what feels like the 9th legendary uncommon creature. You want to talk
Yeah.
about Kutzel?
Yeah, Cutzel Malamet Exemplar is a 3-mana in Selesnya, 1 white, 1 green. You get a 3/3 for it. The legendary creature Cat Warrior, that's fun. And the beautiful text that I love is your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. That is so beautiful to me. Also has whenever one or more creatures you control with power greater than its base power deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. And I'd be interested in this card if it only had one of those 2 blocks of text. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. It effectively means that none of your creatures that you're playing out, like a normal person who plays creatures on their turn, can't be countered. It also means that their Wandering Emperors are going to be very sad little 2/2 token generators. And that's just an interesting sideboard option. And it also has whenever one or more creatures you control with power greater than its base power deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. And yeah, it doesn't create a situation. What you're looking for is anthems and +1/+1 counters. So it kind of synergizes with the set with +1/+1 counters. It's built for limited. However, I think there's a lot of ways in standard. I'm looking at a wedding announcement. I'm looking at +1/+1 counters from Courage of Virtue, Virtue of Courage. No, Virtue of Loyalty.
No,
The 5 mana.
is it loyalty? Yeah, Circle of Loyalty was the first Eldraine. I think it is Virtue of Loyalty.
Virtue of Loyalty. We're running circles around ourselves. Either way, you're going to have ways to pump up your creatures that give them anthems. You're going to have your spellbook vendors be giving rolls to people. And then if it hits, you're drawing a card, which is what we love to do. It reminds me a little bit of Gix in that way, where you need to put a little more effort into those creatures to get your card draw, but you're not losing a life for it. So if there is a Selesnya aggro low to the ground deck, this is going to be a big one for it. There's also some pretty interesting cards. Kellen, Daring Traveler, is a Selesnya, cares about 3 drops and below Selesnya creatures. And also, map tokens can help you explore to get those +1/+1 counters. And there's also a 1 mana return target creature of mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield effect in this. So I think there's pieces in here where you can brew like a very good aggressive deck that's going to draw cards and not get countered and ignore Wandering Emperor. And I can't wait to try it out. It's an uncommon, and I'm going to be brewing with it.
Yeah, there's a rare Selesnya creature from this set with like the if your creatures have base power more than whatever, give them +1/+1 counters. Text that I think is also a card people might be sleeping on because it just A, reads confusing, and B, it's just like a dumb 4 mana creature, but I think it does like a lot, and it has ward too, which we always like. But this, we talked about if there's a pirate deck, this is the reason why. Like if there's a card that, well, first of all, if there's a cat deck in any format, this is going to be single-handedly.
Let's go.
But if I had to pick one card that I haven't seen people getting really excited about for constructed that's going to turn out to be an all-star from this set, it would definitely be this card. Like, everything you said is true. There are so many ways to augment power in standard and other formats. Map tokens, exploring, Luminarch Aspirant, you mentioned Wedding Announcement, other anthems, Wandering Emperor, your own Wandering Emperor +1/+1 counters. Luminarch, I think I mentioned Luminarch Aspirant. There was one more I just wanted to shout out, but it totally flew out of my mind. But that's a long list of cards, and there are going to be more and others. And just that your opponents can't cast spells during your turn text is always underrated. It's a 3-mana 3/3. It just, man, this card is cool. If there's a home that can make it work.
Throw some royal treatments in there.
That's rolls. I want to talk about rolls.
Yeah, rolls.
As a floating around.
They all give you 1/1. Yeah.
Yeah, so this card, I think, is phenomenal. Okay, that brings us to Preacher of the Schism. Walk us through that one.
Yeah, another 3-mana creature. It's a vampire cleric. It's just mono black, 2 and 1 black. It's a 2/4, but it has Death Touch, which is insane to me. Whenever it attacks the player with the most life or tied for the most life, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. And whenever Preacher of the Schism attacks while you have the most or are tied for the most life, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So there's like a concept in Magic whether you're on the beatdown or you're like on the back foot getting beat down. So if you're on the beatdown, you're going to have more life, and you're just going to want more cards to draw and keep pushing that advantage. So that's good to attack with. And when you're on the back foot, you can still attack because you're going to be creating a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink to block. And it is one of the best 3-drop, just straight up swing, I don't care creatures. Maybe Glissa beats it out. But a 2/4 with Death Touch trades admirably with everything. All the 3/3s that are sitting there, 3 mana, doesn't care. This is not going to get blocked a lot, and it's just going to swing and just generate value. It's going to make you your tokens with lifelink if you're behind, so you can absorb attacks. It's going to draw you cards so you can keep up the pressure when you're on the beatdown or you're against control. So, also, a lot of times the first attack is going to do both because you're going to be tied at 20 or 21 or 19, however it is. You can set it up so that you're swinging in for both effects, which I think is just a really good way to start the game off and put yourself on the front foot.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. Like, 3-drop creatures have to do a lot these days. That's kind of like the sweet spot, and you can only play so many of your decks, so the 3-drops that you play have to do a lot of work. But I think this card does a lot of work. I agree with everything you said. I think the fact that the vampire creature token with lifelink comes in not attacking, it just comes in and can sit back and block, makes this card like hard to race in those scenarios. I think you nailed it. I think this card could potentially be really good.
It's not legendary. Run of 4 copies. You can reliably get it as part of your game plan. When you draw a card and lose a life, you actually gain a life because you have Shieldred. So no worries.
Exactly. All right, that brings us to Sentinel of the Nameless City. I can talk about this one for a little bit. So it's
Yeah,
another
yeah.
3 mana creature, right? And that's like I like a lot of these cards, and having played Magic for a long time and spent a long time where cards didn't do this much for 3 mana. It's like, wow, it does all this for 3 mana. Maybe 3 mana just means more now than it did uh, back then. But this is another really impressive 3 drop. So it's 2 and 1 green for a creature Merfolk Warrior Scout with Vigilance. It's a 3/4. Again, impressive body. But we've seen 3/4s for 3 before. And it has the text, whenever Sentinel of the Nameless City enters the battlefield or attacks, create a map token. So this is just a very efficiently costed body that when you're exploring from your map tokens, because your map token is an artifact, you pay 1, tap it, sacrifice it to make a target creature explore at sorcery speed. You talked about there are a lot of green cards that care about artifacts currently, like Teething Wormlet, like
Oh, absolutely.
like this card. Just getting an artifact that does nothing every turn is pretty good. You get one when it enters the battlefield, so it doesn't like have that tireless tracker problem where you have to hold it to turn 4 to play it, and you get one every time it attacks. It has vigilance, so attacking is not as costly. Like it's free sometimes, even if they're gonna chump it or block it to no effect. It can get big itself because the explorer from the map tokens can put +1/+1 counters on it. It's a merfolk, tribal might matter. So I think this card reads very strong to me. What about you?
Yeah, I like this card a lot. I think it's going to be great in like rule beatdown decks. I'm not sure if it's like the best explore card, but I would just like to mention that I think map tokens are like the most interesting Oh, wait, hold on. Activate only as a sorcery. I take everything back. All right, I take everything back.
Yeah.
But the point is, you can get this guy down. Man, I really wish you didn't have to activate it as a sorcery, because that would be such a cool combat trick. Like, am I getting +1/+1? Let's see. Are you gonna block? Anyways,
It's almost like they have
bummer.
smart people that think about that when they design
Well,
these
I think it
cards.
would be better the other way around. It'd be way more exciting. It'd be so. It's not. It's like it's not. Do they have the combat trick? It's ooh. Do I roll the dice? Am I blocking with my Shieldred and hoping that if they pay 2 and make it a 5/6 that my Shieldred dies? Anyways, it gives you value. You can have this swinging out as a 5/6 on turn 4, and then creating your tokens. Good body, vigilance, it attacks. Uh, I just overall solid in every regard, and we'll have to see where it goes.
100%. All right. Queen's Bay Paladin is our next card. Put a gold star next to this one because it might be my favorite call out from this spice pile. So this is a 5 mana, 3/2 black vampire knight. It's a 5/4. And whenever it enters the battlefield, again, or attacks, return up to 1 target vampire card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. You lose life equal to its mana value. So a couple things. One, a finality counter means that if that creature dies, it's exiled instead. That's important to note. And the other thing I want to call back to is I mentioned how I'm coming around on cards that generate value over time for being in play at no additional mana cost. You just bring a card back, a vampire back. The one I'm most excited about is Blood Tithe Harvester because it's one of the best creatures going right now. But I'm picturing this in like a Pioneer red-black vampires deck, maybe splashing blue for Corpse Appraiser because that's a sweet card. But you get to play the 3 mana Sorin that can drop vampires into play, which has always been fairly strong but inconsistent because you need like Sorin plus payoff to do that massive turn 3 play. This is an incredibly castable card at the top end of your curve. Like it's 5 mana. It's not like just some 8 mana green white card that you have in your hand because you hope you draw Sorin like Galton Maverin. This is like a perfectly reasonable card. Vampires have a bunch of ways to gain life. Sorin has a bunch of ways to gain life with his +1 ability, which gives lifelink. So you can offset that life loss from bringing cards back. This might be the first deck I'm building when this set comes out. I love this card.
Yeah, this is a really cool card. A 5 mana to reanimate something is the normal price, like in generic terms. Sometimes you get an upside. The upside of this is a 5 for vampire body, and the slight downside is you lose life equal to its mana value. So if you're reanimating your Blood Tithe Harvester, you're only losing 2 life. Um, I kind of think it would be cool to ETB this and then reanimate another Queensbay Paladin from your graveyard, and then reanimate another Queensbay Paladin from your graveyard, and then reanimate something else as well. And then
I
pay
think
1 mana and sacrifice your Bitter Reunion to give them all haste. That seems kind of fun to me.
so.
Um,
I'm really glad you mentioned that because I'm going to jump ahead to a specific card I want to talk about
all right.
related to that kind of thing. But just we got to keep burning through these cards. I'm calling my shot. This card will overperform people's current expectations of it. I think it's bananas. I like this card a lot. The card I wanted to shout out is called Saheeli's Lattice. It's a 2 mana artifact, 1 in a red. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. Craft with 1 or more dinosaurs, paying 5 mana. So that means you pay 4 mana in a red, 5 mana total, and you exile any number of dinosaurs, at least 1, from play or your graveyard. And then you transform the Lattice into an artifact creature. Its power is equal to the total power of the exile cards used to craft it, and its toughness is 4. So if you ignore the craft part of this card, it's like Bitter Reunion, but an artifact instead of an enchantment. And it doesn't have the haste ability. The haste ability is replaced by the craft ability. So what you have with Bitter Reunion is a rule of 8. You can play 8 of this effect that lets you burn through your deck and leaves an artifact or an enchantment lying around. And there's a card called, we're going to find it, Lich Knight's Conquest, I think it is.
Yeah, the 5 mana black spell.
Yeah. So what this does, it's for 5 mana. Sacrifice any number of artifacts, enchantments, and or tokens. Return that many creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. If you have 8 2-mana cards that are putting things in your graveyard, drawing you to this card as your combo piece, and sticking around as artifacts or enchantments, and the Lattice, if you have a bunch of dinosaurs in your graveyard, we'll talk about some sweet dinosaurs soon, it has value later. Bitter Reunion gives all those guys that you bring back from the graveyard haste, potentially, if you keep one around. I think that's it's another deck I'm really excited to try. And just jumping ahead specifically to the card I'm most excited to try with that archetype, we have Trumpeting Carnosaur, which is a 6 mana, 4 and 2 red dinosaur. It's a 7/6. Trample. When it enters the battlefield, discover 5. It also has a line of text: pay 3 mana, 2 and a red, and discard it. So like a channel ability, it deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So I'd like to just talk. Well, I'd like to point out first. So I had this card like nailed down as like, this is my sleeper pick that no one's talking about. And then I listened to the MTG Goldfish podcast, and it was Seth, probably known as Saffron Olive's favorite card. I was like, oh, well, okay, I can't be a hipster about this now because it's clearly getting some love. But let's just talk about what this card is. It's 6 mana, which is a lot. But when it enters the battlefield, you discover 5. And we haven't talked about that yet, but it's essentially Cascade 5. You flip cards from the top of your library until you hit a card. Mana value, a non-land card, mana value 5 or less, and you get to cast that card without paying its mana cost.
Yeah. Or you can put it in your hand.
Or you can put it in your hand. Yeah, if you just want to draw it, if it's a poorly timed removal spell or something. So this is like 6 mana, 7/6 trample, ETB, cheat on mana. But it's like, oh darn, it costs 6 mana. That's going to get stuck in your hand sometimes. It has a way to put itself in the graveyard if you're trying to reanimate it with my sweet Saheeli's Lattice deck I was just talking about. To also have interaction that's uncounterable because it's not casting the spell. It's like a channel ability. This card, I'm just super excited about it. Do you have any thoughts about this one?
I think it's awesome. I think this is kind of like we mentioned Bronehorde Dracusaur before. This is like the next spot on the curve. There's a lot of really good support in this set for Gruul dinosaurs. There's like a 1 mana Llanowar elf that's specifically for dinosaurs. There's like a whole bunch of Gruul dinosaur cards. So let's just mention, I think that's going to be like a legitimate deck. It's not going to be like memeing that you love dinosaurs. I think in standard, you're going to be able to play Trumpeting Carnosaur and Bonehorde Dragosaur as like the huge payoffs for all the ramp of all the big chunky bodies that you have. It has trample. This one in particular is going to be like self-service in reanimator decks like the Lich Knight's Conquest and just anything else. And then the 3 mana, discard it, 3 damage. 3 damage kills a lot of things. It kills most 3 drops.
Sure
So
does.
you're just gonna, I don't know. I'm excited to play this in dinosaurs. I'm excited to play this in a reanimator. I'm excited to experiment with Discover. There's like a 4 mana Discover 3 card that we don't have on this list, I don't think. And that just might be good enough, like on its own. So being able to cast an additional spell in addition to this, big chunky, if it's just a 6 mana 7/6, then you could do without it. But the other text
Yeah, you don't have to
7/6 really worth it.
don't have to hit much off that Discover to make this incredible.
Yeah.
The flexibility is great. I really like this deck in potentially like Pioneer Possibility Storm decks because you ramp with like your mana elves, so 6 mana isn't that hard to imagine getting to. You make treasure tokens with Fabled the Mirror Breaker, so getting to 6 mana is not that hard to imagine. It's a great copy target for like a flipped Fable of the Mirror Breaker, because that
Oh yeah.
Discover 5 is an ETB, not a cast trigger. And then
Huge.
that deck also doesn't play, like it's limited on what it can play as an interaction, because the combo requires you to not have a bunch of like instants and sorceries floating around your deck. So getting to play this as a beater, if you're going with the fair plan that also interacts, I'm excited to play that, which is one of my pet decks. Speaking of huge dumb guys, I want to bring us to the last creature on our list, which is Bringer of the Last Gift.
The hugest and the dumbest of guys.
Yeah, and I'm bringing this card up as a question since you play more standard than I do.
Yeah. I play a
This
lot.
this is an 8 mana 6 and 2 black 6/6 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, each player sacrifices all other creatures they control. Then each player returns all creature cards from their graveyard that weren't put there this way to the battlefield. So this is like the living end text. So you cast this guy, board wipe, and then return everyone's graveyards to play. Which, if you've built your deck to have crazy things in the graveyard, that's incredibly strong. Um, so 8 mana is just like too much, except there's a lot of like Atraxa and Atali running around that
Yeah.
seems like they're surprisingly castable in this standard. So my question is like, I feel like everyone's writing this off as an 8 mana creature, but it's an 8 mana creature that wins the game, and I feel like we get to 8 mana a lot in this standard. Is this playable actually?
So I have some thoughts on it. I don't think it's playable in a tier 1 deck. I'm so happy that it says if you cast it. That
Yeah,
is
jeez
so
Louise.
nice to look at. So you talked about like the Lich Knight's conquest.
Mm.
Why wouldn't you just, try and build around that? It's 3 mana less, and
Because this board
um,
wipes. It pulls you back into the game. It gets you
yeah,
all the value out of your
yeah.
graveyard, and just takes away whatever they've takes out their
Ugh.
Elish Norn
So
off the battlefield. Their
if this is
Shieldred's
going to
thing.
be good, I think it has to be in a deck that's playing around the descend mechanic, which is like one of the mechanics that we haven't talked about, which just cares about putting permanents in your graveyard. And there's some cards later on that we'll kind of talk about the descend mechanic, but I think you have to put, like, it has to literally win you the game. It's
Yeah,
a
that's for
eight
sure.
mana wipe. You have to have some good stuff in your graveyard. In this set, graveyard hate. There's some graveyard hate in this set. It also makes just all other graveyard hate so good. It's like a ton of graveyard. Graveyard's so important in this standard. Virtue of Persistence, Lord Skitter to counter that graveyard trespasser. There's a bunch of graveyard hate. There's a bunch of graveyard payoffs. Um, there's also like a lot of there is a lot of graveyard hate. Like you might be trying to bring around this in a big way, and they might be aware of it, and they might just be exiling every creature of significance from your graveyard. So I think this will be fun. This will definitely be a fun card. I don't think it's going to be like a tier one, tier two, or maybe even tier three deck.
Yeah, totally fair. I trust you on that, and we'll see. But it is certainly powerful. Coming
Yeah, no,
soon to an
it's more of
EDH
a
table near
commander.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, this is more of like a really fun commander staple. Not staple, maybe like a it's going to be a good card in commander. This is also like we kind of skipped around a lot of the cards in this set because this set way more than Eldraine feels like it's geared towards commander. There's a lot of like, oh, let's have a token tripler, why not? Which is not something, even Modrak struggles in a more like competitively costed thing of being doubler. But oh, let's have a tripler at 6 mana. So there's a lot of uh, commander cards in this set. Lots of crazy gods, crazy like effects that are going to play a lot better in commander. I think this is probably one of those.
I like the Green God for constructed for what it's worth. It's not on this list, but I just want to put it on tape so when it is the breakout card of the set, I can come back and call it as one of the 30 cards I called to pop off. But I'm just plugging it now. The Green God is pretty good.
Yes, if you get in with it, it's going to give you a lot of value.
Yeah. Again, no mana investment for sticking around. That's where it's at.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm following you on this card, and yeah, I will just note like a lot of cards that were designed quote unquote for Commander have turned out to be broken and constructed because they make them over the top powerful for Commander, and then they just work in Standard as well, so they crack the format. Whatever. But we can move on. We've talked about Helping Hand a little bit, the 1 mana white sorcery that returns a creature card, mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Anything specific you wanted to mention about this card, or just that you like it as a kind of novel, color-shifted Unearth effect that's going to be around in Standard for the first time?
Yeah, well, it's just value. You're literally just like up in mana
It does
based off
take
of
some
it.
setup, right? And it comes
I mean,
back
they're gonna kill
tapped,
your
and
creatures. They're gonna kill your creatures. They're gonna kill your creatures. I think it's just we've seen this effect before in black and in white. White has little like reanimate little things, but it's like a Sun Titan trigger on a 1 mana spell. So I like it. It's going to give you value. It's going to bring back your most annoying thing because your most annoying thing is what's going to get killed. So
yeah, it's a fun card. It's
I
a
mean,
fun
if you just
card.
even just look in on a white aggro, like which is one of the best decks in standard right now, everything in that deck is 1 mana, is 3 mana or less. So it's gonna get value. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
like it.
mean, I'm a little skeptical of this card because it takes setup. Like, picturing it in a mono white deck, like, why not just play a creature in this spot? Like, you draw it and it's like, ooh, I can have a creature from my graveyard, but like, why not just have a creature?
Just because you can, they're gonna kill your brutal Cathar, so you just get a 1 mana brutal Cathar,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
Sometimes.
yeah, for sure.
And
I'm, I'm
so
not I'm not 100% like it's gonna revolutionize the format, but you're a plus mana and you get a card that you want out of your graveyard.
I think for me, it coming back tapped is the reason this card
Oh, it's definitely a downside.
isn't going to absolutely smash people, but it is value. You can't scoff at the value that it potentially provides. Next card on our list is Bitter Triumph. This is also, funnily enough, tells you about our quality assurance process. It's on the list of cards on the other side of the screen in the sideboard of this card list that we're looking at, where like to not talk about because it's just like obviously pretty good, but it is a very playable uncommon, which is always nice to see.
Yeah.
So we'll just flag it. It's a 2 mana instant, 1 in a black. Destroy target creature or planeswalker spell that as an additional cost you have to discard a card or pay 3 life. Kind of neat if you want to discard Outlet. We've talked about a lot of reanimation and graveyard type
Yeah.
things thus far. It's a good rate. Hits anything. 3 life isn't that much. Anything else to say about this card before we move on?
It compares to Infernal Grasp in 2 life versus 3 life. It targets Planeswalkers, which is a plus side. It's competing with a lot of good. Go for the Throat is kind of like the main removal card at 2 mana, but this is going to be good for your sideboard, and it's going to be like a total plus if you're trying to reanimate in black, which a lot of decks are trying to do. So uh, we'll see where we'll see how it's a matter of taste, what your deck's trying to do and how you value your life versus cards and
Yeah.
being able to destroy artifacts.
Remember when original Theros came out and Hero's Downfall, which cost 3 mana, 2 of it black, destroy target creature, planeswalker, was a rare? And
Yes,
this
yes.
is cheaper than that, add on a common uh, with potential upside if you're a deck that wants to be discarding cards. So,
Yeah.
what a time to be alive.
Yeah, we're just gonna spend the next 30 minutes talking about power creep and our thoughts on it. So just skip ahead. We'll try and put a little link to skip 30 minutes, but on to the next one.
Glimpse the Core. Why don't you walk us through this?
Yeah, so this is like not power crept from what they've done in the past. It's a 2 mana sorcery in green, which the top is the most important part. You just search, basically, you search your library for a basic forest card, put it on the battlefield tapped. It's a rampant growth in standard. They stayed away from this just because of how strong it is, but we have Glimpse the Core now. We have the Iron Crag, so they're kind of committing back to this. Yes, 2 mana should get you a 1 mana advantage balance thing. Maybe the rest of the game is caught up to it, but there's Glimpse the Core at 2 mana, and then there's Battle Zendikar, the Zendikar Battle, which gets you 2 lands. There's also like a card that does not get played at all in Aftermath, which you can have as a 4 mana, put 2 lands into the battlefield. So there's like a very clear. We're talking about sets of 8. There's a very clear Glimpse the Core, Iron Crag, and then Zendikar. I don't even remember what the Aftermath card's called, but the Aftermath you can even do 3 mana to do 1 land. But there's a very clear path to on turn 4 having 7 mana now, which is coincidentally what Atroxa costs and Atali costs. So look for that. It's an uncommon. Gotta love it. It's just value. It's a good card. Probably going to be played in a lot of green ramp decks.
Yeah, not the card that kills your opponent, but the card that lets you kill your opponent. Big role
Yeah,
player
this
card.
is you're going to see this in your hand, and you're going to say, "All right, I'm gonna have a good game. This is going to be like a
Yeah.
pretty good game."
Smooths you out and gets you ahead. What's not to like? Okay, let's talk about Confounding Riddle. You want to walk us through?
Yeah, it's a 3 mana instant. It has 2 modes. Both of them are totally relevant. One is look at the top 4 cards of your library, pick one of them, put it in the hand, and the rest in your graveyard. So you can kind of expect this effect to be 2 mana. We've seen quite a few of them. And the other part of it is counter target spell unless his controller pays for. So this is a draw go straight up. I'm sitting here. I have 3 mana. Are you going to do anything? Are you going to do anything? You're not? Okay, I'll cycle this out and get a different card, forward my game plan in a more aggressive way. Oh, you are casting something? Counter target spell unless its controller pays 4. Not a lot of spells that are worth resolving are going to leave 4 open mana. So it's kind of a 3 mana hard counter. Um,
Yeah.
so I like it a lot in control. I don't think it's too mean, but I do think it's going to let you sit there and feel good about both of your options being good when you're sitting on your 3 mana and your draw go deck.
So the obvious comparison here is a card whose name's escaping me now, but it's also costs 2 and a blue. It's an instant from like Hour of Devastation or the original
Oh,
Amonkhet.
yeah, I know the art. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
very
right.
clear,
And I could,
yeah,
any other day I could tell you what it's called. But it counters target
something of
spell
will.
unless its controller pays 3. So we're
Yes.
talking about power creep. And then the most important distinction is that had a look at the 4 cards, put one in your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library ability. This puts them in your graveyard, which
Yep.
I think, like, as far as power creep and upgrades, like, you will never like. Good that I can't remember that card's name because I'll never think about it ever again. Um, because this is so much better, right? Like the 3-4 mana thing that for how much the opponent has to pay doesn't super matter. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't super matter. Putting them in your graveyard, you could put 3 cards in your graveyard off of this card while putting a card in your hand, which, I mean, the graveyard is a scary, powerful place. This card is one that I like a lot too, and it's got great art, by the way. We'll flag that. Love that art.
Yeah, it's very fun. Very fun.
All right, speaking of very fun, this next card is a bit of a meme, I have to admit. We're going to talk about Defossilized for a second. Because in every set, they print like a 5 mana uncommon reanimator spell with like the set mechanic or whatever. Return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then something happens. So this one, it's a sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield for 5 mana, 1 and a black. That creature explores, then explores again. Okay? And the only reason I'm talking about this card, and then we can move on and forget about it, is because of Velomachus Lorehold. Because there are some decks in the past that have used Velomachus reanimating, cheating into play, to then attack and loop like extra turn spells, because it reveals the top 7 cards of your library when it attacks, and it has haste and flying. It's a 5/5. And then of those 7 cards, you can cast an instant or sorcery spell for free if that spell costs less than Velomachus' power. So in like modern, Time Warp costs 5, Velomachus has 5 power. You loop your Time Warp type effects, you're good to go. That effect has not existed in other formats like Pioneer or Explorer because the turn spells cost more than 5 mana. I'm thinking specifically of like Karn's Temporal Sundering is a 6 mana extra turn spell.
So you get the double explore,
which gives
cashing
you
on.
Yep. Which
7
gives
power. Oh no!
So more likely, you have a pretty good chance. If you think like there's a 40% chance that you hit a land on your first one, so that means a 60% chance to potentially put a counter on the creature, Velomachus in this case. So a 60% chance that it's a 6, at least 6 power, and then you have, the second time you roll it, that's another 40% chance to hit a land. So it's like essentially an 85% chance that your Velomachus is coming in at least 6 power. If the first one you hit is a non-creature, you can leave it there and get 2 +1/+1 counters. So that gives you a 60% chance to get them to 7 power. So I think it's a meme. I don't think it's going to be playable, but I think it's sweet, and I just wanted to shout it out because I've messed around with like janky ways to reanimate Velomachus with +1/+1 counters, like Neoform to cheat him into play, or Elspeth Conquers Death as a slow way to do it. The 3rd chapter on that brings them back with a counter. So just wanted to flag it, and now we can all forget about it and move on with our lives.
All right, that's pretty spicy. I don't even think it's that bad. It's just a 5 mana reanimate. I mean, Black is using, I'm blanking on the name, the Saga to reanimate, which just costs 5 mana. So it has upside if you're not using it, but I think this card should actually see some play in Standard as well.
I think the Saga has a lot more flexibility and value going forward.
Oh, no, it does for sure. But if we're on a budget, here we are with our uncommons.
Thinking about our budget, uncommons are good. So the next card to talk about is Subterranean Schooner, which gives me big Smuggler's Copter vibes. So let's talk about it, because that card was pretty good. So this is a 2 mana vehicle. It costs 1 and a blue artifact. It's a 3/4 that costs 1 to crew. And whenever it attacks, target creature that crewed it this turn explores. So this card, I think, is going to be very dependent on if there's a blue deck that wants to be aggressive like this. Because, like, the line of 2-drop this, 3-drop, play a creature, use that creature to crew this, attack, explore with the creature you just played, potentially have a mana or 2 up for interaction, is kind of good. Like, this is a 3/4 beater that can be swinging on turn 3 when you play creatures behind it. It can turn, your 1 mana blue flyers with upside into like 4/4s if you're exploring a lot. It does not have any evasion itself, so maybe it's harder to attack with this than it looks like. But it's just a neat card that I think is very aggressively costed at 2 mana.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say about it. It just depends, like, can you find the right creatures that are going to have the right payoff to explore? And is explore, like, I think you need synergy with explore to really put this over the top. Otherwise, you're just kind of on like a slightly disadvantaged beatdown plan where you're swinging with a 3/4 as your payoff. I don't think is going to get you any like traction after turn 4. So you got to make those explorers worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and maybe it is. We will see.
Yeah.
Next artifact to talk about is Tyrion's Journal. Sorry for knocking over my mic. I was that excited about the journal. Stay with us, and we're back. So Tyrion's Journal. It costs 2 mana. It's 1 and a black for a legendary artifact. It has 2 abilities. The first one is tap it and sacrifice another artifact or creature to draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. I think it's maybe playable if that's all the text that it has. The second ability, 2 mana, tap it, discard your hand, transform the journal. Sam, what does the journal transform into? Transforms into a legendary land called the Tomb of Aklazats. It taps for a black mana, and you may tap it to cast a creature spell from your graveyard this turn. If you do, it enters the battlefield with a finality counter on it and is a vampire in addition to its other types. So, I mean, 2 mana. This card does a lot. It feels like an obvious EDH All-Star for any black deck. But like even in constructed, 2 mana to get a value engine like this down, if you're at all interested in sacrificing your own artifacts or creatures, this does not cost mana to sacrifice them. You're limited to once a turn and a sorcery because you have to tap it, and it has that sorcery restriction, but it's a free way to be throwing your own stuff in the bin or getting value out of things with death triggers. And then late game, when you're out of cards, you pay 2 mana and tap it to discard 1 or 2 lands that are doing you no good to transform it into a land that's going to let you cast stuff from your graveyard every turn. Like, this card, I think it's really good. You think about, like, 2 mana value engines that have seen a lot of standard or constructed play in the past, like Reckoner Bankbuster or Maze Mind Tome. I think this could be great.
All right, hear me out. You're playing your Lich Knight Conquest deck.
Yep.
All right.
Which I know you're already bought in on. You thought that was sweet.
Yeah. Can you put the Lich Knight Conquest on the stack, hold priority, and then pay 2 and tap to discard your hand, and then reanimate everything onto the battlefield? Does that work?
Yeah, should do.
All right, I'm in on it, baby. Let's go. Yeah, this is like just
hold on. You mean like cast it
while it's on the stack, respond with the 2 mana tap, discard your hand at instant speed,
and then sacrifice it? No, because are you trying to sacrifice it to the conquest?
I'm trying to have conquest on the stack.
Yeah.
You can also but also get your whole hand into the graveyard before the conquest resolves.
Oh yeah, for 7 mana.
Oh yeah.
You can do it.
All right, that's what I'm gonna try and do. I'm not advocating it to anyone, but I'm gonna try and do that. I think this is like really good in like little braids, artifact token decks where you're making a lot of blood, you're making a lot of like little things that you're trying to sacrifice anyways. I think it's gonna like grind in there. I don't know if it's the best card in the deck, but it's definitely worth a try, and I think it could be good.
Yeah, for sure. All right, moving on to Throne of the Grim Captain. Tell us what this very complicated
I put this
card
on there.
is.
This is just a guilty pleasure, all right? This is a guilty pleasure. We mentioned a lot of like descend mechanics. We mentioned a lot of reanimator as like things that are going to be in the set. This is a 2 mana legendary artifact which just says tap, mill 2 cards. And I think because of the mechanics that we have in this set, that might be pretty decent. You don't have to put mana into it. There's not a lot of amazing things that you're missing out on for turn 2. It's kind of like a, you can take that turn off and still win the game. And you're just going to mill 2 every time. So if you're trying to reanimate something, you've got value. There's some stuff that we haven't even mentioned any of these cards, but there's a lot of stuff about Lorgoyf. There's a lot of like, we want permanents in our graveyard to make our creatures stronger. There's a lot of reanimator stuff going along. So I think that's like, that maybe is good enough. But the reason I brought it up is until I found out that Sectarian's Journal Lich Knight combo that we were just talking about is you can craft this So you need to have in your graveyard, which you've been milling, a dinosaur, a merfolk, a pirate, and a vampire.
Or in play.
Um,
They can be in play too.
they can be
If
in
you want to
play.
be
They can be in
spicy.
play. It's it's probably not going to be in play though, just because you're milling. So dinosaurs, there's decent dinosaurs, there's decent merfolk, there's decent pirates, there's decent vampires. I looked at a lot of them. There's none that are like crazy. Blood Tithe Harvester is kind of an auto include. A lot of them are red, so this is going to be a red plus a maybe blue and green, whichever merfolk side you want on it. And what you get is if you for just 4 mana, but you have to have these in your graveyard, which maybe you will. You get a 7/7 with Menace Trample, Lifelink, Hexproof, and whenever it attacks, each opponent sacrifices a non-land permanent. Then you may put an exiled creature used to craft the Grim Captain onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking. So that seems like a really fun way to win the game. It's got some pretty cool art in both of its versions. I think we have like the showcase art up here, but if you just want to do big stupid things and have a crazy payoff and win in unconventional manners, um, this is it. This is your card. Make a big spooky skeleton spirit pirate and destroy stuff and put Galta onto play for free. So
I like
that's my
it.
fun little card.
I have a craft question for you, and I guess I need to
Yeah.
find a card that has the actual
The
craft
next
text
one
on it.
down, Tithing Blade, will explain it to you.
Okay, so yes, Tithing Blade. Um, so exiling it and transforming it, well, exiling it, the thing that you're crafting is part of the cost, so that people can't respond
Yes.
to that, which is good. Because I was gonna think about all the legendary Boseiju blowouts that could be linked
Yeah.
linked to
That
this.
is a good. That is like a good. That is a good point. I was looking into that too. The exile is you cannot. It's not like you're flipping over your
Nicol
Vor
Bolas.
and collects, or yeah,
Yeah.
you're not like exposing yourself to a complete blowout. However, and that brings up a little point. There's so little artifact hate being played in standard right now, and there's so many value artifacts that are coming into this set. So I'm very curious to see what control decks do and what there's like people have really sideboarded in enchantment hate for all the virtues and
Hmm.
all like the wedding announcements and all the leyline bindings. People have just been letting like Urabrask's Forge sit on the battlefield as like an uncontested artifact. There's not really that many other artifacts worth destroying in standard. So stuff like Throne of the Grim Captain. There's like this crazy. Oh, this next one, Chimil the Inner Sun, legendary artifact. I'm interested to see whether or not people start main decking artifact hate because right now there's hardly any.
Well, let me answer that question for you. Everyone's gonna play a braid. That's that's printing it in this set. It's coming to standard. I just feel like a braid is gonna be one of those
A
like
braid is huge.
premier
A braid
cards.
value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's I would expect to see a lot of a braid coming up here.
Yeah, I mean, there's no abrade at all in standard right now.
We've
You know,
looked at
times.
we've looked at tithing blade a couple times just to reference the craft ability. Did you want to talk about it briefly, or did you want to get to
Yeah, I
Chimo,
mean,
the Inner
two
Sun?
mana, 2 mana edicts are just valuable, and then it has a lot of like you can sacrifice all these things where like, oh, just sacrifice an artifact. This is what you're sacrificing, where you've already got the value on the card, and now you get to sacrifice it to Braid, sacrifice it to Tarian's Journal, and if you're just in that weird situation where you're at 5 mana with nothing better to do, go ahead and grab this at the beginning of your upkeep. Each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life for an artifact. I think that's too slow to be a control finisher in this day and age. But if you have nothing better to do, it's all upset, and I can see it coming in handy.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. It goes in my Lich Knight's Conquest deck.
Absolutely, this is perfect for Lich Knight's Conquest. You want there's so many things with like we just had bargain in last set. There's so many ways to like take advantage of this. You can even craft this into something different with something else. Like just having you're basically two for oneing. If you could just consider an artifact on the battlefield having value, this is kind of a 2 for 1. It's not as good as Sheoldred's Edict, but coming down on turn 2, you can get rid of the one thing you want to get rid of if they have a 1 drop like Skrell that you're going to destroy anyways. If you have to, then this is a 1 for 1 that can be a 2 for 1. So very fun for 2 mana.
Nice. Talk to me about Shamil the Inner Sun, because
This is. I guess I do have another guilty pleasure here.
I
I
was gonna
just
say my
light
head
up when I
almost
see this card.
exploded when you put this on the list. I was like, "What?" So walk us through it.
So this is kind of reference to like Immortal Sun. It's a 6 mana legendary artifact, and spells you control can't be countered. I love it. I love this in like control versus control. If you get this down first, and at the beginning of your end step, discover 5. So this is like their slightly more complicated cascade they felt like putting in. I use exile cards, and then you take a non-land card with mana value 5 or less, and then you just cast it. At the end of every turn, you're casting a spell. You can have your farewell, not your farewell, your sunfall. You can have your board wipes. You can have your planeswalkers. Incidentally, like at the end of your end step is like the worst time to cast a planeswalker. But most planeswalkers are 5 mana values or less. So I love this in like slower mid range, and I love this in control, and I love this to be against control. If you resolve this against a control deck and they don't have artifact hate, you're probably going to win. If you're in a mid range matchup and you resolve this, you're probably going to win. Um,
So
it's
in
6 mana. That's kind of expensive, but
yeah,
that's the world we live in.
in control, it is nice that the Discover 5 lets you draw the card instead if you're hitting your counter spells or removal spells,
Yep.
because they might not line up. And if you hit the Wandering Emperor, I think you can still activate it that turn because it has that
Yeah.
static
Yeah, I think
text,
so.
which is nice. However, I would just say, like, I don't think control needs a finisher like this, because you just win with the Wandering Emperor or Sunfall tokens, right? Like, you don't. I don't think you need a value engine like this at the top of your curve that just draws you cards. But it is a powerful card. I mean, no doubt, it is a powerful card. But it is 6 mana. It is gonna die to everyone's abrades. Um,
I guess I didn't realize the Abrade meta was coming for us. But I think this is a fun card. I think this is a value grindy card. I think not your stuff can't be countered is super cool to me. And I think that Discover 5 is just like you're kind of getting your mana back, or close to it if you have like it's also like one of those cards you want to play in decks where you have Leyline Binding and you have Virtue of Persistence, where like all your removal is not going to be triggered by Discover. So you can have like your, Trumpeting Carnosaurs not trigger and get all your 5-drop Planeswalkers onto the battlefield reliably, without accidentally hitting a Leyline Binding or whatever your removal suite is.
yeah, for sure. All right, my turn to talk about a big dumb
All right, yeah,
artifact.
tell me about your big dumb legendary artifact.
The Skull Spore Nexus. 6 mana, 6 colorless and 2 green, so 8 total mana. Legendary artifact. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. If you're familiar with the Great Henge, that's just that cost reduction
It's
text.
going to give you some flashbacks right there.
Yep. Whenever one or more non-token creatures you control die, create a green fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness, each equal to the total power of those creatures. Third block of text, 2 mana, and tap this artifact to double target creature's power until end of turn. Yeah, so it's talking about Great Henge flashbacks. This card is just very castable. Like, you have your Love Struck Beast sitting out, this costs 4 mana. And then for the rest of your game, anytime any of your creatures dies, you get a token that's roughly the same size. Or if multiple creatures die in like a board wipe, you get a huge one. And then you get that huge 6, 7, 8, 9 power token, you double its power and kill your opponent with it. Alternatively, I think this card is like has a lot of fair upside. Unfortunately, a lot of removal right now is exile based, which I think this card might be better in like not standard, because standard just exiles everything right now.
Well, that's why Bartolomeo de Presidio is going to be popping off for you in
Yeah,
your Abzan big creatures.
potentially. But where I like this card as a spice component with cards like Croxa, where you have this card out and then you play Croxa for 2 mana. It sacrifices itself, goes to your graveyard. You get a 6/6, and they have to discard a card. That just
Pretty
seems
gross.
pretty good to me. There are like a lot of other big, cheap fatty creatures with downsides. Like there's an 8/8 god for 2 mana in this set.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't
Um,
mention that. We were like talking about spites, but we skipped over the 2 mana 8/8 for some reason.
yeah. Power creep, baby. Um,
Yeah.
Again, that's a card that's got a lot of attention. But you get that out there, and then you like Voldaren Thrillseeker it at your
Oh
opponent's
yeah. Yeah.
face for 11 damage and make an 11/11 with this card out. I mean, you're in 4 colors at that point, but like this card is just neat and strong, and I like it with Croxa specifically. Like just thinking about that, it's like yeah, I'll take some Croxa in a Jund Skullspore Nexus deck.
Yeah, I think this card is it's actually 1 mana less than the Great Henge, so your Love Strike Beast would get it down for 3 mana.
Oh, you're right.
But a lot of times it's going to be 2 green because there are so many. Like we talk about like things upticking, like Virtue Persistence and Lord Skitter is going to be more relevant than another. I think Fight Rigging is just getting all the toys that it could possibly want. I don't think they like. I still don't think they knew Fight Rigging was going to be in this set.
Yeah, they
So many
didn't. They didn't.
creatures. There's so many creatures that are 6/6s and 7/7s that you can drop down. There's like a 6/6 dinosaur for 3 mana that you can drop down. And then just like the fact that these are going to be 6/6s that are letting you cast this on turn 3 or 4. And then when they die, you can create a 6/6 token. It's like, oh shoot, like I gotta kill this thing. Wait, there's another one. And then you can also get the double creature's power on like both sides of it, right? Because you can like double up, the 6/6 and do a 12/12. It dies. You create a 12/12 fungus, and next turn double it up into a 24/24. You can fling it. You can swing it. Whatever you want to do with it.
Fling it or
I
swing
think
it,
this is
baby.
a
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, swing it. Voldarin Thrillseeker is like a real good is like a card that you can play in real life. There's a very good fling effect on a Rakdos Knight that's in from the previous set. So
Yeah, so this card, so there's an effect in spoiler season that I've recently become very aware of where, like, the first card spoiled, everyone gets used to and, like, kind of forgets about. It's like they get spoiled 3 weeks before everything else gets spoiled in, like, a first look thing. People are like, oh, that seems cool. And then they just discount them when the spoilers are happening. And this was one of those early cards, and they tend to spoil really powerful, exciting cards early on that then just get
yeah,
overlooked. This card isn't like a sneaky budget pickup, gets like $18 right now on the list I'm looking at, because it has like splashy commander implications and appeal for things like that, given how the Great Henge was. But like for just actual like the power of this card, I think it's like the One Ring is like the most recent example of this. Like that was spoiled so early on in Lord of the Rings spoiler season, and then turned out to be incredibly busted. But people just like didn't think about it. They're like, oh yeah, I've already seen the One Ring. I'm just never gonna think about it again when evaluating cards from this set, with very few exceptions. And this is just another like early card that was spoiled as like a check out this super sweet card that's gonna be part of the set. And it's just so strong. Like if can you just imagine like the helpless feeling of like you have Go for the Throat in your hand, and they have a massive beater, even just like a Shieldred that you have to kill
yeah. You're
with this in
doubling. It doesn't
play,
take too long.
and you go for the Throat it, and even if they're tapped out and can't tap this to double Shieldred so that they get an 8/8 token, you're still paying 4 mana to remove their Shieldred and give them a 4/4. Like this card, it's just going to like ruin people's day. It's like
Yeah,
it's that kind of well, what are you supposed to do about it? Although, as previously mentioned, you can just abrade it.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. That's worth the 2 hour runtime of this podcast alone. Let's four of a braids when we're dealing with this standard right off the bat.
There you go. All right, last card in our interesting, it was spicy, super fun, and slept on cards rundown.
Yeah.
You put this on the list. Tell us about Poetic Ingenuity.
Yeah, this is our only enchantment. It's 3 mana, so it's competing with a lot of really good 3-drop creatures. But it has 2 lines of text, and whenever one or more dinosaurs you control attack, create that many treasure tokens. And whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. I think this is good for both of those things. Like getting a treasure off of a dinosaur swinging in, reasonable ramp, not amazing. And whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a treasure token. So you can run this in like as a payoff, as for tokens. You put this in your braids deck. You cast an artifact spell. Now you have two things that can be sacrificed to it. It's just this neat little value piece that has like a little trigger, a little push, little pull. I think it takes a little bit of thinking to optimize. I think there's like several ways you can brew around it. I don't think either of those brews or any of those brews are going to get it to a tier 1 main deck status, but I'm really hoping I open some in my packs, and that I can play with this card and just see what it can do, because it just speaks to me as like a Magic card of the stuff that I like to do, just grinding out little value and getting payoffs.
No, I like that because again, those cards, that maybe they're not going to win a Pro Tour, but they spark joy for us. Like that's why we're playing the game, right? Like we don't have to win a Pro Tour. That's not why
Yeah,
we're.
it says you inspire me right there. Like right there on the cards, three
There you
words you
go.
inspire me. Yeah, yeah. So
We're not going to be winning the Pro Tour even if we're only playing the most meta decks. So, like cards like
yeah,
this are
yeah,
just a bunch of fun. Is it good? I want to love this card because it has the Healy on it,
exactly.
which
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just
There you go. There
such a
you go.
sucker for.
How did she get to this plane, by the way? Is she not from this plane? Am I confused?
I've been a little out of the lore. I think there's an omen path, like people can just walk wherever they want to go
Oh,
right
okay.
now.
So she's like into technology, so she went to the dinosaur world, and it makes sense.
Well, that's her
Yeah.
girlfriend's there.
No comments. No comments. No comments. It's fun.
It is fun.
Fun. Yeah.
But this card is sweet and fun. The fact that you are kind of pinned into playing dinosaurs and artifact spells, and there
I think
aren't.
you're fine just doing artifacts because the dinosaurs will trigger the treasure.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, I think you can build this as like an artifact deck. I think because I don't think they actually mesh. I don't think there's a lot of dinosaur artifacts, and I don't think there's a lot of artifact dinosaurs. So I think you go one or the other, and then you like create the treasures. Like even if you just like cast an artifact spell, it's just some like one little, you cast your tithing blade, and you get a 3/1 that you want to swing with. And it's going to be a tough block because you got it for free, and you get a treasure token every time. There's also one or more dinosaurs you control attack create that many treasure tokens, so it can be good ramp in a dinosaur deck.
Yeah. No.
But the dinosaurs have a bajillion options for ramp, so who knows?
Yeah, and
But
I hear you about this being more exciting for the cast and artifact
yeah,
spell
but there's just
side.
like a lot of little buttons on this card that I really want to kind of like play around with. Um, so
Yeah.
one of those cards for me.
Yeah, you take that last line of text off. I think this card's amazing. But it's probably neat and cool as it is. Sorry, that
Yeah,
last
you talk
line.
about this ability triggers only once each turn. I was like,
Yeah, for making a
so
dinosaur.
yes, yes, yes. If you could just storm artifacts, create dinosaurs, you know, there's a lot of crazy things to do with that. But yeah, yep, fun little card. You want to just go over these? You do like a 10 second for all the obvious things going on here. 10
Um,
seconds up each.
sure. Yeah, watch. Okay. Clear through it. Here we go.
Yeah,
Ready?
yeah,
Cavern
yeah,
of
yeah.
Souls. Great proven land. It's going to see play places. Probably not going to change
Great
anything,
reprint.
but thank goodness it's been reprinted. Restless Vents. This reminds me of Hive of the Eye Tyrant in the way that it attacks in, except the attack triggers better, and it comes into play tapped, but it gives you 2 colors of land, so this seems extremely playable to me in multiple formats, at least as a one-of. We already talked about Bitter Triumph, good removal spell. Get Lost, maybe a great removal spell, we'll have to see. Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel, I think is like, woof. Like it's all, every card on this list is kind of like, oh my goodness, because that's why it's on this list as like cards people are keyed into. But card does a lot. Is a 2/1 flash flying tempo-y creature that also draws and discards cards. It's like essentially like a built-in Curious Obsession almost on your mono blue flash flying creature, which is pretty good. Molten Collapse, good removal spell. Kitesail Larcenist, good removal spell. Disguised as a human
Yeah, it's a little
pirate.
funky. It's a little funky, but it's a good fun little guy.
Tishana's Tidebinder's getting a lot of pop for potential modern merfolk because it shuts down like the One Ring or elemental triggers, which is cool. I don't play much modern merfolk anymore, but I hope it works out for them. Bloodletter of Aklazats
Let's
seems like a really nice top end to mono black aggressive decks. Kind of like a mono black Torbrand. The main difference for me is that Torbrand helped on defense because it just added damage that all your creatures were doing, where this only gets through if you get through for the extra damage, but it also has flying, which is nice. And then Bonehorde Dracosaur, which, again, not a slept-on card per se, but I think it's being slept on in the way that, like, people think this card is good, but, like, this card, I would bet, is great.
Yeah, it's weird to me seeing Bloodletter of Aklazats and Bonehorde Dragosaur right next to each other for essentially the same price, where I think Bloodletter is like, yeah, I could see that competing kind of for a spot where Bonehorde is like the best card in your deck that you just get to and just outvalue and win.
Yeah, let's end on this since bringing it back to the financial side, since we do talk about that. Gosh, I hit my mic again. Apologies, listeners. Let's look at TCG player Bonehorde Dracosaur. All right, you can buy this card right now for $15.57 on TCG Player. The market price is $16.79, which is what Goldfish shows, but $16. You can get this card for about $16 right now. And we've seen a lot of cards at Mythic Rare from standard sets, which this one is, that start off pretty anticipated. I'm talking like Sheoldred the Apocalypse, Elish Norn. Like, they come out, Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and they're pre-ordering for like $15 to $20, and then in 2 weeks they're $45 or $50. That's been like a consistent price pattern.
There's always one card from each set.
Feels like it these days. Feels like it. And it's tough to like take a swing at a card that's pre-ordering for almost $20. But like, if you want a Bonehorde Dracosaur for like a commander deck, just think about this. I think this card is eminently playable in standard, likely playable in a format like Pioneer, and it's going to be a must-play card for any tribal dinosaur or dragon commander deck, which are both
people love dinosaurs, people love dragon.
Incredibly popular decks. Dinosaur and dragon creature type focused decks are incredibly popular. I don't think this card is ever going to cost less than $16. So, like, if you want one, I think you should get one. And if it goes down to $1 and you're out $15,
send us an email. Send us an email. We'll
and I'll send you a heartfelt apology. But from where I'm sitting, this looks like a pretty good pickup at $16.
Yeah, in these pre-orders, the prices are inflated by a lot. Let's say 98% of these cards are going to drop by at least half their value from where they're at. I think we mentioned Skullspore Nexus. That's a $18 card. Bonehorde Dracosaur is at $17. I think those two will probably, at the end of the day, be about that or more at the end of it. So see if there's a dip. If you need this card for $17, go for it. But a lot of times, just like a dip for the first 2 weeks, and then people kind of go crazy on it. But the fact that it can be played in Commander for the two tribal things, it's monocolored, which is great for inclusion in Commander. It has ramp, which is great for Commander. It gives you card advantage, which is great for Commander. It creates dinosaur creature tokens, which is great for Commander. I think this card is going to be one of the cards from this set that it's just is what this set is known for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's at least as playable. Well, maybe that's not true. It's just so good and so playable and so going to be sought after. So I agree with what you're saying. So there you go. I have a Dragon Tribal EDH deck that I guess following my own advice, I need to pre-order this card now. So let's end
This is
up
not
this...
financial advice. Do not come at us.
That's
However,
right. We're not
we are
fiduciary
interested
either.
in seeing. Yeah.
We can take advantage of you. But I need to go pre-order a Bonehorn Dracosaur. So let's wrap this up. Thanks for listening, everyone. I had a bunch of fun going through these cards.
Holy cow, let's go.
Hey, they're listening to us because they want someone to talk their ear off for like a 3-hour car ride. So we're doing our part.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me add another 5 minutes here. Do you mind? Hold on, I have a prepared statement. Basically, just these are the cards we're excited for. If you're excited for a card, just go for it and have fun with it. I don't know what economy that you're dealing with in, like, if you're on Arena, if you're on MTGO, or if you're playing in tabletop, or if you're just going to proxy these things. Who knows? But have fun with it. Find something. There's so many cool designs in each of these sets. There's so many cards we didn't even talk about. So if there's something that appeals to you, just go ahead and try and brew it up. That's part of the fun of these sets that we have fun with. And go for it. And maybe you don't end up with the best deck ever, but you're going to end up with something that you're proud of and that you have fun with. And to me, that is more of a joy than just finding someone else's optimized deck list and then crafting that and spending your money on that. So that's my advice.
100% agree. Although there's nothing wrong with net decking if that's how
you net deck. I get some. Yeah, I take some decks from the other people's creations and I enjoy them as well. But I encourage you to follow your own path and end up with a B tier deck. That's what I'm encouraging you to do.
Again, not financial advice. And we will see you for our follow-up podcast where we talk about how these actually impacted. And we can tell you the results of my Lich Knight's Conquest deck with Saheeli's Lattice against your Poetic Ingenuity deck. We will fill in the listeners on how that epic showdown goes.
Sure.
We will catch you all next time. Thanks for listening. And that does it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please like the video. And please reach out to me with any questions, either in the comments or on Twitter at Monetary Mentor. I look forward to hearing from you, and until then, be kind to yourself and have fun out there.